Hi guys, in this episode I'm going to show you how to use histograms and how to improve your photos using histograms. Hi guys, my name is Kelvin and I design, and that's why it's called Kelvin Designs. Click right here if you want to subscribe to my YouTube channel and get all the tutorials that I do as they come out. And click right here to subscribe to my newsletter and get all the raw files for this episode and every other episode that I do. In this episode, I'm going to show you what histograms are so you can really understand them. Using simple words and easy examples, histograms are really simple once you know how to use them, but when you don't fully understand what they represent, it just looks like a graph. There's highlights and there's shadows, but how do you use that to your advantage to make your photo come out more and really get the result that you want? So, in this episode, we're going to go over a bunch of examples and show you exactly how you can use those. Let's get started.
All right, so in this episode, we're going to take a look at histograms, what they mean, and how you can use them to make your photos better. So I'm going to start this by going over a few photos, and we're going to take a look at histograms. And if you want to actually follow along, get all the files to follow along in this tutorial, you can go to my website and go to kelvindesigns.com/signup. And in here, put your name and your email, and it'll take you to a page that'll give you the raw files and source files for this episode and all my other tutorials. And so that's pretty simple. Okay, and if you do want to see, I have a few courses on my store. Illustrator Quick Start, some gallery black and white portraits with Lightroom, and I have a few courses in here that you might find interesting. So to start, let's look at what the word histogram is, and it's a diagram consisting of rectangles whose area is proportional to the frequency of a variable and whose width is equal to the class interval. Now that sounds really complicated. It sounds like a really strange way to explain it, and it actually makes all sense, but let's take a look at a simpler way. We know it's a diagram. We know we've all seen it at some point, and I'll just click on this image and you can see it right here. This is the histogram. So we've seen the graphs and we've seen, it goes up and down and there's colors sometimes, and we know that there means it's information in the photograph, but what exactly does it mean? If I go back to the definition, it's a diagram consisting of rectangles. Now those rectangles in this case are every line that goes up, like this little line here of green that goes up here, and every line in between. There are 256 for an RGB image, that's red, green, and blue. And there's 256 levels in here for every channel. So that means there's 256 bars that can go from the bottom to the top. And those are the rectangles in this case. And the area is proportional to the frequency of a variable. So we're going to get into the detail of what that is, but if we look at this image here, for example, and I'm going to just double click on this, and we see, okay, there's a lot of dark pixels, there's a little bit of light pixel here, there's nothing that looks to be pure white. And if we take a look in the histogram, we see, okay, there's a lot of information here, and this is what's called the shadows. In the middle, it's what's called the midtones, and on the right side over here is the highlights. And you can break it down into two more segments, and we call these the quarter tones, which is about 25% over here, and the 3/4 tones, which is about 75% right here. So in this case, anything from the quarter tone down to the highlights, or all the highlights, there's really no information. You see, if there was a lot of very white pixels or close to white pixels, all this information would be on the right side. And this is telling us that a lot of the information is in the shadows and in the quarter tones. And the quarter tones is really the sky, and all the shadows is really everything that's below it. And what these little rectangles, what do they mean? Well, if we take a look at over here, which we'll say is about 80% or 85% darkness, if we were just looking at the luminosity of it, 85% darkness, that's where the most pixels in this image are at that level. And it doesn't mean that they're 100%, but it's just the highest, the most amount of pixels that are the same color is right here at 85, about 85% of luminosity. And they happen to be blue, because we can see that they're blue here. So this tells us that if we wanted to get more information, well, we'll have to lighten the image up a little bit. And by lightening the images, specifically in the shadows, we're going to reveal a lot of information. Okay, let's take a look at a really quick development of this image without getting too complicated. But always keep a look at this histogram. So we see we have our shadows over here, blacks on the far right, highlights here, and the whites. Okay, so if I go in here and I say, well, I want my shadows to be opened up. That means I'm lightening my shadows. You see how it's taking everything that was in the far left and bringing it closer to the middle. All right, that's about as far as I can take it. If I wanted to lighten everything in here, but for my highlights, see, I'm moving everything to the right, but I'm losing, I'm not really gaining, I don't have that much highlight information. Everything that's over here is gone. But this first bit of it is actually in the highlights, so I am bringing more information in the skies. So that's what's happening. And essentially, and I'm going to just reset this, here you have very steep changes, both in the highlights and in the shadows. And what that means is that you're going to have very abrupt changes. So you're going to have very, here it goes from a pretty highlight to a strong shadow, and not very many levels in between. And that's something you don't want. You want optimally in a photograph, you want to have nice ranges that kind of go up and down, but very sharp, strong edges means that you're clipping, which means you're cutting out, going from straight white or straight black or any other color. So you notice that if we bring this down and bring the shadows, open that up, we're getting sort of a more even range here in the histograms. And if I want to make my whites white, meaning I want this to be stretched over to the right side, I will go over here and I can bring it over. Now, if I hold down the Alt key on this whites in Lightroom, it'll show me when I'm going to clip. But I can also see it right in the histograms. As soon as I'm going to get close to that, I see that those are those pixels that are going to become completely white, which you really want to avoid. And I'll show you what it looks like if I let go. You have complete pure white over here, and it goes from pure white to some other color, but now I've lost a bunch of information. There's a bunch of information that has been clipped out, so we don't want that. So you bring your white over and take it over until you're not clipping, so something around here. And if I hold down the Alt key, I can bring it here. I see that. I'm like, okay, I want to bring it a little bit back until there you go. I don't have a single pixel that's clipped. And I can look at it, what it looks like without the Alt key. And there you go. So this really tells you, okay, well, I could still go a little further, but I would end up with a couple white pixels, and you want to avoid getting too much of that. But a little bit is you can get away with a little bit. And the same goes for the black. If I were to bring the blacks to the left over here, I'm going to be clipping more and more and more until I have a bunch of pixels that are just pure black, going from pure black to whatever other color that's in there. And if I hold on the Alt key on here, I see that, wow, I'm turning a bunch of pixels completely black. So you don't want to do that. If I bring it back, the black you can get away with having a few black pixels, a little more than you can with the white. But essentially, what I want you to see is how this is affecting the histogram. You don't want to clip too much, and this little indicator will tell me when I'm actually clipping. So pop there. When it goes red, I know I'm clipping. So I'm going to get away with a little bit of clipping, but not too much. Okay, and if I hover over this, it'll actually it'll show my shadow clipping, which you can see in blue on the picture there. Okay, and you can obviously change your exposure, and you can see that I'll be moving my pixels from left to right in the histogram. If I turn down the exposure, I'm moving everything to the left, bring everything to the right. So that's pretty simple. Okay, in essence, you want to distribute, for a neutral photo, you want to distribute your histograms as best as you can. If you're doing a design of a flag and it's a bright yellow background with black spots and so on, your histogram will be completely different. But this is, you know, an image of nature, and there's all sorts of colors. Granted, you have greens and blues and so on, or dominant greens and blues. You still have pixels of every color. And so that was the first image. A little interesting note is we have a kind of a blue cast over here, which is in the background. And what's interesting to know is that whatever color is on the far right, or essentially in the highlights or in the whites, is where your color cast is going to be. So if I see, before even looking at this photo, I can look at the histogram and say, oh, I'm going to have a blue cast. And right behind it, I have a green dominance over here, which is obviously the nature part, the grass and the tree. So you can, if you wanted to get rid of that color casting, this is pretty simple. This is the color, and it's in my highlights. So you can now affect that. All right, let's take a look at some other photos here. This second photo here, so I can see, okay, well, I have a lot of information in my shadows over here. Quite a bit of information in my highlights, very little into my midtones. So it's a highly contrasted image, but not enough in my midtones. So if we go ahead and develop this, I would do the same thing. But this time bringing down my highlights is actually going to bring a lot of information in. See how, look at the histogram. I've brought in a lot of information that was completely hidden, and by bringing it into the midtones, we're really taking advantage of that. And then shadows, the same thing. Open up the shadows, and the more I put this, I've brought in all that information that was stuck in, like, let's see, yeah, we're stuck in about 85% and above, and I'm bringing it in, making it more into the midtones. Okay, now obviously this is a drastic change. There's still, I still have pixels that are clipping in here, but I really want you to take a look at the histogram, and let's just take out some of the white empty pixels, do a little bit of the black as well to kind of get a decent contrast. And there you go, you have a pretty level. We still have more information in the shadows than in the highlights, so you could actually just increase the exposure a notch without trying to clip too much over here. So if I did that, I would actually revert my white to 0 and something like this. Okay, in any event, we see that this is an interesting way to really read your histograms. And again, you have your everything that's dark on the left, everything that's light on the right, and your midtones in the middle. And the higher the peak, it means that of that exact color or density, density for when you have all your channels put together, that is in the image, in how many pixels you have of that in your picture. And we'll see a little bit more in Photoshop where it's explained a little differently. All right, let's take another image that's more of a high key image. So there's a lot of pixels that are sort of in the highlights, or should be. And let's actually just straighten this photo out, just so. Here, take this horizon right there. Boom, something like this. Okay. And so in reading this histogram, I see there's very little information in blacks, very little information in shadows, nothing in the whites, and what's actually in the highlights is here, but it's mixed between the highlights and the midtones. So again, I'm going to, if I bring down the highlights, I'm really not going to give anything. So I mean, it's not really worth. You see how I'm changing, and look at the histograms. Well, and if I bring it up, it's not really, I don't really want to change this. What I do want to do is kind of open up the shadows, because I do have some information in these shadows that I'd like to see more. And my white point I'm going to bring to the right. Now I don't want to be totally white, because it's more of a winter bluish cast, which we can actually see right here. The very right part is blue, which means that I have a blue cast. And my shadows I can bring down a little bit, something like this. If I want to bring more of my information into the middle, I'll have to underexpose, and meaning I have to open up my shadows a little more. And basically what I want you to see is we don't have to have an exact pattern. This tells us information about this photo. This is a high key image. So trying to put this into the middle and completely distribute the histograms perfectly doesn't always work, because this is a high key image. And if you were to do that, it would no longer be a high key image. So that's not necessarily what we want to do. But it's interesting to know and to understand, what does this histogram mean and how can you use it to your advantage? I know that there's a lot of no information in these very high, in these very light pixels. So if I want to get more detail, well, I can bring my whites a little whiter, and I will essentially distribute my pixels a little bit better. And I can bring this down just a notch. So I'm distributing the highlights a little bit more to my midtones. So that I brought this here, but I'm spacing this out a little more. Something like this, without getting too white. All right, let's look at before and after. Now we're seeing obviously more information, especially in the shadows, but I've now distributed the histogram a little bit. I've spread it out a little more, so we do have a little more detail. And again, if you wanted to add more color, you want to accentuate this blue cast and make it look more wintry, well, there's other tools for doing that, and that's not really what I'm getting into in this tutorial, but I really want you to understand what these mean. When you see these ranges, what do they mean? Okay, and let's take a look at this sky over here. A sky that definitely has a dominant of purple, and you have some blues and some warm colors down here. Lots of dark in the bottom part of this, which you can see over here in the blacks. Quite a lot of information, quite a bit of information in the midtones, almost nothing in the highlights and in the whites. What that means is, if we open up the shadows, we will reveal quite a bit of information back into the midtones. And in the highlights, if I brought the highlights down, I'm not really going to reveal anything, because there's not much information to reveal there, which we can see here. So essentially, you would want to either expose this image a little more to distribute that, and maybe bring it down a little bit, not too much, something like this. And you can see your color cast right here, and it's a mix between the blue and the red, making this purple. Okay, now while this is not what I would have wanted to do with this photo was essentially just for the sky. I don't really want the bottom part of it. And in a later part of this tutorial, we'll take a look at using this sky. All right, here's another portrait I took, and initially I'll just make a virtual copy so we can look at the original. And the original was color. I ended up making a pretty high-key, sort of a high-key portrait. Initially it was pretty flat. You see a lot of information in the shadows here, not very much in the highlights and the whites. Obviously, when I go black and white, the color information is gone. But I see that I have a lot of information in my whites and highlights, not very much in my midtones, and quite a bit of my shadows and my blacks, which is what gives you this this look of lots of black and lots of white, very light, not much in the middle. And anyway, this is a style that you might want to try. It's a kind of a fun, it's a style that I enjoy. But if I were to try to flatten it and put more information in the middle, I would get a much grayer picture and less. This is a pretty good representation of high contrast. Lots of information in your shadows and your blacks, decent information in your whites and your highlights, and not so much in your midtones. So you get a high contrasted image. Okay, and I'm just going to delete this. All right, now this is a photo that I took as a that I wanted to use as a grunge sort of a texture. And the reason I'm showing you this is a lot of information right in the middle, not much in your highlights and your whites and so on. So if I wanted to get more of this detail out, pretty simple, I would have to, make my whites whiter, make my blacks blacker, try to move it to the middle, the histogram, as much as I can, and add even more contrast. Adding contrast is essentially doing the whites whiter and the blacks blacker in a different way, but essentially distributing that more and more and more and more until you're really got the most out of that. I can bring the whites a little more to the right here, in which case I have to underexpose even more. Now, I'm getting more and more information out of this. So if I wanted to really get a texture that's grungy and sort of superpose it or put it in on top of another picture to give it that sort of a textured look, this is a good way to make use of your histograms to get as much detail out of this. Okay, and here's another photo, picture of my son after eating strawberries at the farm. And it's interesting, you have quite some information in the highlights, quite some information in the shadows. And again, if I were to kind of bring down the highlights, open up the shadows, on a portrait like this, I would want to get as much detail in the midtones as possible. So, and I could bring the whites a little bit and make the blacks a little blacker, and probably open up the image a little bit. As you can see here, if I put it at 0, there's more information in the shadows than there is in the midtones. So just bring it out a little bit. And then you can do other corrections, like you can desaturate and stylize and so on. But it's nice that when you first start color correcting an image or stylizing or anything, try to get a neutral look, which means that you have a good distribution of your levels, a good distribution in your histograms, and then it's easier for you to stylize. If you start off with an image that's not necessarily well distributed, this is a decent picture because my histograms are actually pretty good. It's still easier for me to do anything that I want once my picture is a little more color corrected. With a better start like this, I can now apply color casts and apply different effects and so on, like desaturating and so on. But it's better to do that once you've color corrected your image. Okay, and here's another picture of that I took in Moscow. Again, let's just straighten this out. Something like this. Oh, I'm going to cut off the top of it, but I don't know if it doesn't look like I'm totally straight. I think it's actually a curved. It's a slightly curved. Something like this. All right. Also, this crosswalk is giving us a little bit of a illusion of being crooked. In any event, let me just see if I can do something pretty straight. If I take out that crosswalk, I look pretty straight. All right. Well, let's just leave it like this for now. All right, and I can see I obviously have a dominant of blue here, and I have some other colors in here in the shadows. So again, if I open up the shadows, I'm going to redistribute as much of that information into midtones. And in the highlights, I don't have much to reveal, so this is not going to really do much different. Maybe a little bit in these highlighted areas, but essentially, I'm a little underexposed. So I'd have to open this up like this, or I could just make my whites whiter, something like that. And my black's a little blacker, something like this. And if you're wondering what clarity does, clarity is essentially adding more contrast in this area right here. So it's not really affecting so much my pure blacks and my pure whites as it is going into my midtones and applying contrast just in the middle there. So it gives you a sense of more sharpness in those midtones, which you can see here. Here's kind of a little softer, and I crank up the clarity and suddenly it looks like it's really sharp. More contrasted makes it look sharper. Okay, so we're going to take a look at how this is in Photoshop, and we're actually going to I'm going to export this, and we're going to apply this sky and see how we can use these in levels in Photoshop and how this works. So I'm going to select these two, and I'm going to very simply export them. So let's just go here and export, and I'll put them on the source files that you can download when you sign up for the newsletter. But I do want them to be as DNGs, and that's fine. Okay, nothing else. I don't need to rename, and this is good. Export it. Okay, now in here, well, it's still working. So I got the first one, and here's the second one. All right. So if I, let's start with this one, and I open this up in Photoshop. It's going to open up with Camera Raw. It has all the settings that I did in Lightroom because it was a DNG file. And I'm going to open up that image. There we go. And then I'll take the sky as well. Open that in Photoshop. Same thing. Well, I think I reset this image. So I'm going to keep everything here as it is. And I can see the histograms, obviously. And I'm going to open up the image. OK. And what I'll do is I'll just take this, the sky, and I will place it on top of this image. And that's fine for now. All right, it's a little bigger, so it's fine. Remember, I cropped the this image here, so it should be a little bigger. Okay, and what I want, we're going to open up the histograms in here, and I'm just going to take this out. Don't need that. All right, and here we're going to say I want the expanded view, and I want all channels view. Okay. So now I can actually see everything. I have my red, greens, and blues. My blues is on the right because I'm dominant in highlights over here. And I can see every channel by itself. I could, by default, it may actually show the channels not in color. So you can do show channels in color, which can be useful. And there you go. So and the channels, I can also look at luminosity. And this is basically all the density of the image, which is actually sometimes very useful to know and see. So I actually like working in this mode. Sometimes I go down to the color so I can see everything, but essentially this is basically showing me what I already have right down here. So I like to see the luminosity, or you can also look in RGB, which gives you all the color information as well. Luminosity is really the density, so I can see that most of my density is right here. So one thing that that Photoshop shows you in the histogram, which is really nice and good and useful in understanding histograms, when I'm in luminosity mode and I go here, well, I see if I go left, I'm at 0, and if I go to the right, all the way to 255. So this shows me that there's 255 levels, and that's true for every channel. So you have 255 in the reds, greens, and the blues, and then it tells me, for example, I'm in the, if I go, let's go to the 40 or 41, it says that I have 987 counts. That means that there is 987 that's at level 41. Level 41 being this dark, this fairly dark in the shadows. If I go to the highlights and I go to 245, which is practically white, it says that I only have 24 pixels in this image, or counts of this. So, and right below it, it says percentile. So that's basically the equivalent of 0 being total darkness and 100 being total whiteness. So it's very interesting because it actually gives you the count. So it's a good understanding. This doesn't mean it's 100%, but this is the highest count. The highest count is 4,859 counts of these pixels. So it's interesting, or here 5,300. So it's interesting to see if I were to make this image much bigger in pixel size, well, it's just going to increase that count because that's the number of pixels at that luminosity. And this works as well in RGB, same difference. So here I have 10,000 in this area, and you see there's very little information in the highlights. Okay, so and if I go to this image over here, I see, okay, same thing. I have a lot of information in my shadows. That's all the bottom part. If I were to crop this image, let's take a look at this. Let's I'm going to reduce this and use the crop tool over here, and let's just crop out the bottom part. What happens? All my information is now more in my midtones because all those shadows are gone. So now it's calculating, okay, well now the most information, or the most times a pixel is used is at about 14 or 15% at 7,200 counts. So let's just undo that. Okay, so let's work on our composite here. All right, so I see that I have a lot of information in my blues, and essentially I want just the sky here. And I have some reds and some greens, obviously, but really where I'm looking at is my blues. Now, I can go and make a selection. We can also just go to the channels here, and let's take a look at the blue. All right, the blue channel, this is super blue, so it's all in white. And I could almost just make a selection out of this. And we can actually go ahead and let's try that out. See, if I go to the green, I do have some contrast, but not such a strong contrast between my sky. And same here. So the blue should be the best, and it's not too bad. So let's try this out. Go to my quick selection and go in here. Selected all that. Go in here. Pretty good. Come out of here. Take that out. Hold down the Alt key to take out a section. And let's go in here and make this a little bit smaller, a little bit softer, and take some of this out. Okay. Take some of this out too. Again, I'm just in my blue channel, right? Okay. Now let's go back to RGB and let's say refine edge. So now it has this section. It's showing me. Let's go to the view here. Let's look at this the other way around, and let's just look at this on overlay for now. It's giving us a pretty good thing. All right, so I can increase my radius, make it a smart radius so that it can try to interpret the trees over here. Make it a little bigger, a little bigger. All right, so it's getting more and more information over here. And I can also take my brush over here, which is the refine radius or the erase refinements. So in the refinements, I want there to be a little more refinement in here. And let's just increase the size here a little bit. Here, I want all this. You need to refine in here, get some of that information. That's pretty good. Okay, so I keep bringing it in here. There's a lot of stuff in here it needs to go and grab. So, all right, and then in here, there's a little hole right here. So let's just click on this right here. See if it catches any of that. No, I'm gonna have to select that separately. It's too enclosed. So we'll know in here, take out some of this refinement. Undo that. Okay, just kind of telling it to reconsider this whole area here. Same here. Refine over here. All right, anyway, there's a whole other tutorials on outlining and so on. This is not really for that, but let's take a look at how we can use this now to our advantage. All right, so I have this selection, and if I go to my layers, I have my sky that's above it, and let's go in here and apply this as a mask. Okay, and I'm going to unlink the sky from the mask, so I could essentially manipulate the sky separately from the mask. All right. Okay, now I have some power lines here that I would have to take out. But, all right, let's zoom out a little bit so I can see a little better. I can see that, all right, I still have a bit of a outline here. And what I can do, I'm actually going to go ahead and command click on this, go to my channels, or actually I can stay in my layers and just say select, save selection. If I want to go back, and I'll call this original. Okay. And that way, if I manipulate this mask, so I'm going to Command D to deselect. If I select this and I say, well, you know what, I should need a fuzzier edge. So I go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and I'm going to make the edge a little softer, something like 2.5 pixels, something like that. Hit OK, and then I'm going to. You don't actually see this, but if I go to Command L or Levels, so Adjustments, Levels. Now, because I'm on the mask, these here, the histogram you see here is just of my mask. So I have a lot of information in the very highlights, a lot of information in the very darks, and nothing in the midtones. Because I'm either selected, which is black, or completely white. There's just a little bit of grayness between the two. So let's say I darken it, I'm essentially revealing, you You see how it's opening up that mask, and the other way around where I'm eating into the picture. So it's really handy to understand this. Well, I can use these levels to my advantage in making a more detailed mask. And before we actually go into doing this, I'm going to take this whole layer and I'm going to put it in multiply mode. Now it's obviously, I have a very strong blue background, so I'm not really going to see much. I could also just do an overlay, in which case it'll be a little brighter, but this is not quite what I want. So what I'll do is I will put it in multiply, take this out, take this selection out again, so command click on the mask, and I'm going to go here and let's go and edit some of these levels just for the blue. Notice that these histograms are very different because it's the histograms of just the areas that are selected. So I can make my whites white, which means that I'm really brightening as much as I can. I can even brighten it further, something like this. If I go in here, I'm going to clip, but essentially I don't really mind at this point, but I'd rather kind of do it on a gradient. So something like this. Again, this is an adjustment layer, so it's non-destructive, so I can always come back and edit it. All right, so let's close this. And then now when I put my sky back on and I go in multiply mode, well, I can actually see it much better. Before, after. Well, multiply adds pixels, so if you're closer to white to begin with, the more you're going to see, and the nicer it'll be. Okay, so let's take this sky. I'm going to do a Command T and just kind of make it a little bigger. I also don't want the trees and so on in the background, so I'm going to actually make it considerably bigger. I could always clone some of this out later on, but all right, something like this, maybe a little bit closer to the horizon. Okay, bring it 2 pixels up. Okay, something like this. I'm going to hit OK, and now when I look at the histograms, it's considerably different. Whereas before I had a dominant blue, I now am more leveled, the blue and the red. I'm still a dominant blue, but the red is kind of coming in. And however, I do know that originally it was a dominant blue in this image, so as it was, obviously integrates better because it's a true photograph. Here, it's a little cut and paste. Beside the fact that I'm going to fix the edge here, which looks like it has a glow on it, it also, the color is a little off. So if I go in here and I say make some levels, so it's an adjustment layer, okay? And I'm going to hold down the Alt key so it only affects this image. It doesn't affect everything below it. And now I can tell it, if I go to my blues and I say, well, I do want some more dominant blues. So go in here. Sorry, that's the wrong one. Go in here and I'm adding more blue. I could also go in here and just say, well, let's just bring the midtone a little further, making all of this kind of go to the left, right? You can see the adjustment as I do this. So before it was like this, or it was actually at 1, so it's kind of in the middle. And now I'm putting it back closer to how it was originally. I could also just go into my RGB and add and manipulate here, and this would affect all channels at once, but I don't really want to do that. So, but I did here add some more blue, and it makes it kind of integrate better because that's how it was originally. So there's a good way to, when you're doing your composites, the closer you are to your original, obviously in terms of color and tints and color casts, the better it will integrate. So if I go in here now and I will, let's hide these, I will adjust. So I go to Command L to adjust the levels of this mask. And let's try to darken it a little bit so that we don't have that outer glow. Something like this. It's not too bad. Okay. We can do something like this. We can blur it even more. So filter and Gaussian blur. Go up here somewhere. And 2.5 again. Something like this. And you can also, wherever you see whites, when you say, well, you know what? This is where I can take my burn or dodge tool, and in this case, the dodge tool, and let's take Exposure, 50%, mid-tones, that's pretty good. And in terms of size, well, we can go a little bigger than this. Let's go something like 220. And now when I dodge in here, see I'm getting rid of that white. And I don't want to necessarily dodge everywhere, just up in here to that. That's pretty good. All right, let's see, before, after. Now I did lose some of that yellow in there, and I could go in there and hide that. But this is not too much a tutorial on outlining, and you can go in there and brush all the details out. I really wanted you to understand the histograms and how it can affect you in a composite. So we now see that we still have a dominant of blue, and we kind of cleaned it up a little bit in the foreground here, but this integrates much better. Okay, and so there you go. You have your composite that can be improved by fully understanding histograms. Well, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you understood and learned from these histograms. And if you have any questions, please leave me a comment below in the comment section, and I will try my best to answer you.
All right, guys, I hope you liked that episode. And don't forget to subscribe to my newsletter and to my YouTube channel. And share this on your Google Plus or Facebook. It really helps me. And I will see you in the next episode.